I think I just turned myself off. No, I turned myself on. There we go. So I think after a few days, everybody who needs to react has had a chance to react to things that have happened in our city once again. It's kind of a strange piece of like, how do you bring these kinds of things in? And I think there's going to be more of a broader tie-in to kind of where we're going with the series that we're in. So I don't want to just say something and then pause and move on. I think you'll kind of catch the clue as kind of where we're going with some of the thoughts this morning. I think the tension you get into, and this is really where I think the demand for me as a whole, like I understand living in a fallen, broken world is going to result in fallen, broken things. And at some level, I think we have to, if you read my blog this week, one of them, the opening of it was really about a greater responsibility from leadership. Why do we start with justifying actions or threatening response? A friend of mine wrote me wondering about perspective, and I said, I guess I just really wish the people around us would just start with, we're sorry. We've gotten to a space, and this is the danger, like watch this, and if I ever talk about like the devil's desire, okay? Satan's desire is the destruction of life. That's Satan's desire. He hates you, by the way. Wants nothing more than for you to be destroyed with him, because he knows his end is hell. And so we get into these places where we start to use phrases like unfortunate. We don't use names. We simply say that woman or that officer. And we start to dehumanize the moment. And the more we dehumanize the moment, we begin to lose the longing for life and calling life good. And the more inhumane we become by dehumanizing these things into simply news cycles, I think we end up more and more closely to the agenda of the devil than to the agenda of Christ, who loves life, who made life, who died so that we could live. And so I think that becomes the bigger tension. Like we make it an event rather than grieving the loss of someone who genuinely died. We begin to look at things from angles. From the time I wrote my blog, there were 4 new video angles that came out. And I've spent the week going, I wonder from which angle of life I most wish to be judged myself. And we start to justify, the officer was justified, or the woman was justified, or this was justified, all based on angles. Well, which angle would you find yourself most justified? Or do you get to curate your life in such a way that people can only see you from a certain angle? But when things become public, we justify everything by how we want to spin. And regardless of how wrong or how right someone was, a person still died. Why can't we stop there? Just for a moment and go, this in itself is tragic. And if there are ways by which then we should respond, not react, but respond, then let's do that. I think what we see in the course of this, and even especially for believers, right? Especially for believers, we get into this conversation about what are those things that really are forming our lives, because all the opinions that we draw from, all the sides that we take, all of the choices that we make are being formed by some influence somewhere. We're always being formed. One of my favorite books that I ever read, or at least, fair, one of the best titles of books I've ever had, is Ever Forming, Never Formed. And the premise of the book is that our lives are constantly and continuously being shaped. It's a Christian-themed book. So the idea is that we are being formed more into the image of Jesus day by day, and that all of these things are part of the forming experience. And until we are finally with him and like him, we will be formed until that last breath, until we have a final formation, right? Omega mode or whatever. Whatever the kids say these days. To be fully like Christ, with him and like him, will always be formed. And there are influences that form us. And when you see tragic things, like I said this when COVID first happened, crisis doesn't create new realities. Crisis is an accelerant to what already exists. So when you go through a financial crisis, you're not all of a sudden out of money. You were mismanaging your money long before that crisis happened. When you go through a relational crisis and people call me, Pastor, we have to meet this week. Why? Because my husband wants to leave me. Why? Well, for the last 20 years. Okay, I can meet with you 2 Tuesdays from now at 2 o'clock. You don't understand the crisis. Neither do you. Because if you did, you wouldn't call me right now. You'd have called me 10 years ago. So crisis is an accelerant to what already exists. COVID didn't divide our country. George Floyd and the situations around it didn't create racism. They already existed. But crisis is an accelerant to these things, and so we see these kinds of situations happen, and we have to go back to what got us to this point? What has formed us so that we're responding and reacting this way? Now, the beautiful thing about the morning, if you're new with us, and I see some new faces here, whether you're joining us online or in the room here, we got a few things, right? This was always the conversation to happen on this particular Sunday. This was not the secret conversation. This is not something that changed as a result of what happened in our city. Forming influences and practicing the way and learning to be like Jesus was always the conversation 7 months ago. This is where we were going to be today. So let's talk about what forms us, because this is what we see. As a believer in Jesus, when it comes to these kinds of situations, the crisis reveals what's already in my soul. It shows what's most forming me. And if my responses and reactions to the world around me aren't matching up with Jesus, then something else has the chief voice in my life. Does that make sense? So let's talk about forming influences. 3 key things that we talked about last week if you weren't with us. The whole point of the idea of practicing the way, goals that will change your life. Like, I believe with everything that I am, the single greatest life I can live is lived in relationship with Jesus. To be with Jesus, to become like him, and to do as he did. As best as I can in all things. Not perfectly. I am being formed. I'm not arrived. But this is the aim. How do I live into this space of being with Jesus, becoming like him, and doing as he did? And so we talk about those 3 things. When we talk about Cornerstone, like our number one desire is that every person here would live a life that is connected to Christ and his community, that the full life that Jesus promised could be experienced through what we call living 6G, the 6G, fully connected life. And in that life of connection, of being with him, I can be like him and I can do as he did. That would lead to the single greatest, most fulfilled life anybody could possibly imagine. And how Jesus works that life out in each of us, well, that's on him. what the practical dynamic, the fruit, the reward, the life, the outcome may be different for each of us, but the greatest life we could live is lived in that relationship. So we talk about spiritual formation. When we get to the later parts of the New Testament, and when you start to break down the Bible, if you ever go to like a bookstore or you want to start researching the Bible, they break the New Testament down into 3 categories. So you've got the Gospels, Acts, the epistles, sometimes referred to as the later New Testament, right? So from the book of Acts, we get out of the gospel language, the phrase discipleship isn't used. We use it a lot in churches, but the phrase discipleship isn't used in the letters of Paul or Peter or the Hebrews or Jude or 1st, 2nd, 3rd John. It's not used there. The language that's used is formation, transformation, and imitation. Those are the words that start to be used. That we are imitating Christ towards each other, that we are forming ourselves. The Spirit is moving us to transform our lives. So we take this idea that spiritual formation is the process by which our inner being is formed into a particular shape, or what we might call character. And so we go, what are these things that are shaping our lives? And that character that's being shaped in us can be Jesus or anyone else. You can fill in the blank who it is. When I was a kid, I wanted it to be Captain America. I didn't grow up in a religious home. I actually learned how to read when I was 4 years old through comic books. It just the images began to shape the words that came out of my mouth. And you could watch like the early 1980s, 70s Captain America. And everybody respected that guy. He was the leader of leaders. People loved what he did, the way he carried himself. Like even to the point where people thought he was like a Boy Scout, right? And it kind of come out in some of the movies later, but things have changed in some of that. But like I would look and read Captain America comic books, and I can remember as a kid going, what would Captain America do right now? Well, one, he had that really awesome shield, and I don't. It'd be awesome if I did. I would have gotten so much trouble if I had a Captain America shield. Because like, you ever tie a towel around your neck and jump out of a tree? Didn't work so well, right? I would have done so much with that shield, I'd have been in trouble. But just watching how he lived life, the way he treated people, the way he engaged with persons of color, and Captain America was one of the key white civil rights superheroes, supporting people of color. The way he talked about being a good citizen, the way he led things, like, I wanted to be like Cap. Well, now I just want to be like Jesus. And anything can fill that influence. You will either become more like Jesus or more like someone else, and that anything or someone else is true for any of us. And you see it in the way we respond. Like just for a moment, go listen to your neighbors, go listen to your coworkers. You know immediately who's forming them by how they responded to the situations this week. I can tell you to the people I talk to without finger pointing or accusing them, yeah, you're being influenced by right-wing propaganda. You're being influenced by left-wing propaganda. You actually want to pursue Jesus. You can hear the difference in it. And the dynamic, the tension with the formation is that there are so many different forces that are forming us all the time. It's not just that Jesus has to be the primary influence. It's first, always, and only. And the struggle of my soul is to put myself in a position to be formed by Jesus alone. Because I want to be formed by a lot of things. The real question is not, am I being formed, but to whom or what am I being formed? And there are things, we're going to watch a video here in just a moment that's going to talk about 6 unique influences in our life. But as we start to work through this dynamic of what's influencing me and what's forming my life, at some point, like, we've gotten into, with my littles, listening to audiobooks. Shameless plug, the new Harry Potter series on Audible is amazing. Like, full cast read with music and sound effects. It's like, just close your eyes, it's incredible. But even still, there's a narrator. There's a primary voice. There's a primary voice that's telling the story as you're listening. And that's true of us. The narrator of our soul, the one who's telling our story, is it Jesus or is it something else? Is it trauma? Is it a habit? Is it the space where we live? In terms of addiction, this is what we've now learned. Your zip code is more significant than your genetic code to determine if you will be an addict or not. Where you live, the environments you put yourself in are significant. So what are those influences? So if I could,
how
we'll run
we
this video,
become
watch
who we
this, and we'll come
become
back.
is a sacred mystery of the human soul, taunting the brightest minds of both science and spirituality. But there is a surprising level of agreement across disciplines. We are formed by 6 primary forces: our habits, our relationships, the stories we believe, our environment, time, and experience. The first 4 forces are more active, more about what we do. The last 2 are more passive, more about what is done to us. Let's take a deeper look at each one. We are formed by our habits. What we do on a regular basis, we become. Reading the news, doom scrolling on social media, going to the gym. The things we do something to us. They get into the core of our being and shape who we become. The journalist Charles Duhigg called this the power of habit. It's easy to think we're just watching Netflix or checking email late at night or buying another pair of shoes. But actually, we're turning a kind of invisible fulcrum in our heart in a particular direction. We're becoming a type of person. Secondly, we are formed by our relationships. We become like the people we spend time with. Think about your family and friends. The odds are very high that you dress like them, think like them, talk like them, vote like them, spend money like them, and so on. Third, we are formed by the stories we believe. God wired the human brain to search for meaning, to take all the data points of reality and turn them into a story, a narrative to live in and live out. This is why we love movies and novels and telling stories around the campfire. And every day we are exposed to stories. Stories about what is the good life, what will make us happy, and what the meaning and purpose of life even is. These stories shape us far more than we realize. And whatever stories we come to believe are true, determine the kind of people we become. For example, one of the reasons so many marriages end in heartache is because no marriage can possibly live up to the story we are told by Hollywood and pop music, which is very different from the story Jesus tells. The stories we believe give shape to the thousands of decisions we make every day, from whether we stay in a marriage, to how we spend our money, to how many hours we spend at work. Pick your stories carefully, because they will determine who you become. And our stories and relationships and habits all come from an environment. Whether you live in a small town or a global city, in a Western secular culture or a traditional religious culture, we all become like the place we live. And in the digital age, we all live in 2 places at once, in our city or town or area, and in the echo chambers of the algorithms that define our digital home. This may be good or it may be bad, but it is. You will become like your environment. These forces work on us slowly over time. They sneak up on us little by little and have a cumulative effect. We wake up one day and realize we've changed. And through experience. We are deeply shaped not just by what we do, but by what is done to us. Nowhere is this more true than in our family of origin and our childhood, but it's also true of our whole lives. Do we go to college or drop out of high school? Get our dream job or file for bankruptcy? Get married, get divorced, or stay single? Our experiences deeply shape who we become. In summary, we are formed by our habits, relationships, the stories we believe, and our environment. And this happens over time and through experience. We call this paradigm unintentional spiritual formation because it's a synopsis of how we are formed with no intentionality, just by waking up in the morning and going about our day. The question isn't, are you becoming someone? It's, who or what are you becoming?
I think that's the big question we're trying to wrestle with, right? Who are we becoming? I'm either becoming more like Jesus or I'm becoming like someone else. It's not just I'm more like Jesus or I'm not. I'm always being formed. So who will I be most like? Paul makes this incredible transition in the book of Romans. Side note, in September, we're going to pick up a 4-month study of Romans, just in case you need something to look forward to this year. In Romans 12, the narrative of Romans changes. He's no longer talking about this big theology in Jesus. That's how Romans opens. He's not bridging the gap between Jews and Gentiles. That's the middle of the book. He starts in Romans 12, and he starts to unpack what does it mean to practically live as Christians. And the very first thing Paul says, the very first thing he says to practically live out the way of Jesus, the very first thing, he says, do not be conformed anymore to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And you have to pause just for a moment, because this is the dynamic that we have to, the lens by which we view the world. When you start to ask questions about stories and narratives and who's leading the charge, the question becomes, what's the chief story? Who's in the driver's seat? Am I a Christian who lives in America, who has a certain set of ideals that I'm permitted to have in this country, and so that becomes the downflow of my story? I am a Christian in America who may be Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, fill in the blank, Green Party, whatever. Or am I an American who happens to be a Republican and I'm Christian? The order matters. I am an American, I am a Democrat, and I'm a Christian. The order matters. What if I'm a Democrat then an American? Then, like the chief driver of your train matters. Because if your nationality or your political party or your alma mater or your favorite sports team or the trauma of your past or whatever sits in the driver's seat of your story, you are being conformed to the pattern of this world. If anything but Jesus sits in the primary seat driving your soul, you are conforming yourself to the pattern of this world. And the invitation is to be no longer conformed to the pattern of the world. There are so many different kinds of adjectives we can use in life. They can be about race, gender. They can be about financial position. They can be about trauma and hurt, addiction, victimization. We can put any story in the driver's seat and be formed by the pattern of the world, or we can put Christ in the driver's seat and go, you're the one who's going to shape my life. That's the big key. I will either be more like Jesus or more like someone or something else. The question is, which? So we talk about unintentional spiritual formation. Because as a whole person, all of these influences, my habits, my environment, the stories I believe that are true about the world, the relationships that I have, time, experience, all of those things will have an impact on my soul. Relational psychology says that the 5 people you spend the most time with have more influence on your life than the whole weight of the population around you. So who are you spending your time with? What does that look like? What are those key relationships? How are they shaping your soul? What are the habits when you first wake up in the morning, when you go through your day? What are the habits or routines that you find yourself in? Some of those habits are good, some of those habits are bad, some have a neutral effect on us, but they're all shaping at some level the stories we believe, the environments we put ourselves in. Solomon said it like this. Solomon was given this incredible gift of wisdom, and he writes these different statements of wisdom that we collect together called Proverbs. And he says, there is a way that seems right to man, but in the end it leads to destruction. Jesus would say it this way, that there is a road that is wide and broad, and anyone can go through it at any time. And that wide, broad road leads to destruction. But narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way that leads to life. Choose the narrow way, Jesus would say. So we start to look at how we live into the influences around us. And if I don't pause for a moment and go, what is it that is shaping my soul? Then I will let anything else take control. So one of the practices we would like you to do this week, you'll have an email come out about it later on today. I also have a handout for a shorter version of this. The email, I think, is a 7-page version. It's incredible. If you have the opportunity to take it this week, download the link, spend some time with it. Even if it takes you longer than a week, spend some time with it. This is a short version. It's a formation audit. And it's going to take a look at those different pieces. Take some time this week. Don't let things just unintentionally shape you. Like, take some ownership of your soul. Putting it under Christ. No longer being conformed to the pattern of the world. Write out your daily routine. What are your habits? What are those things that are shaping you and forming you? Write out your daily routine. Write about your meaningful relationships, past or present. Who are those meaningful relationships that are shaping your life? Who spent the time, or who, sometimes it's not even positive shaping, right? But what are the things that have gotten us to the point where we are? What about your family history? What does that look like? How does that impact things? What about how these patterns influence you? That's what we're going to ask through, like as you start to reflect on these things. As we start to do the formation audit, what we're trying to do is to go, who's telling my story? I happen to believe Jesus has a greater story to tell. And when I align my life to him, I live into that greater story. If you're looking for more resources on this, I wrote a book about it several years ago called The Essential Story. That's what we're walking through. All the things that help me align my life to Jesus right here, right now. How do we live into that? Don't beat yourself up over this. Like, one of the hardest places we often talk about, like, I love those videos and we talk about them at home sometimes. We tell and we don't judge, right? Okay, we tell and we don't judge. You go first. Don't judge yourself on this. This isn't a beat yourself up kind of situation. This isn't to figure out how terrible you're doing. This is about alignment. Remember Jesus and his yoke from Matthew 11? We talked a little bit about it last week. Like, that yoke, that cart from the ox back is in perfect alignment. The ox, you, pulling the cart, are yoked to the burden. That's what the cart is called. And whatever that burden is carrying. And on top of that cart is a driver who has control of the reins, and he wants to put his yoke on you, his discipline, his way to lead you. It's all about lining my life to Jesus. For all the things that I think are driving the train, There's one that leads to the greatest life I can know, and that's Jesus. So this week, Wednesday night, we will start back with our adult Bible study, kids programming, teen programming. We're going to walk through. You don't have to have it finished, but I want to walk you through the formation audit and talk about some of those significant pieces more in depth and conversationally than what we're doing here. We're going to pick up week by week in this practice of what it looks like to follow Jesus. If you have not yet received any information regarding practicing the way or resources available to you, that probably means one of two things. Either you've opted out of our email services, one, or two, we don't have the right contact. I guess there's a third one. Three, it's going to junk mail, but that would never happen to anyone at Cornerstone, that you wouldn't have already approved our emails coming to your inbox. So I know it can't be that one. So if you haven't received things, did anyone get the prayer practice this week? It's fantastic practice. If you're going, God, I don't know how to pray or what to pray, grab the prayer practice email. It's got some great information in there for you. Today, somewhere around 3, maybe 7 o'clock, I forget when I scheduled it for, the formation audit will be in your inbox. Look for it. It's a great opportunity. Like we really believe, like if we peel back all the layers of everything else happening in the world, moral outrage isn't going to solve the problem. Have we figured that out yet? You get mad about all kinds of stuff happening in the world. It's not solving the problem. Political alignment isn't solving the problem. We live in the most divided political climate in the modern American world. Our politics aren't solving the problem. As a believer in Jesus, we may not solve the problem. But I lean into what Jesus says. When he teaches us to pray, he says, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. There is still something about this place where God is moving and invites his people to move with him. And if I allow anything else to form my soul outside of the goodness of God, I am going to find myself aligned to a story that only brings destruction. There is a way that seems right, but it leads to death, Solomon said. So along with Jesus, choose to enter the narrow road and find life. My greatest hope for our church is that we would find that life and that life would impact into the way of others. Only Jesus. Let him drive the train. He only leads you to better places. So the invitation is for us to take a look inside to go, God, what in this world has been forming my soul? And how can I align my life up to you greater? May we have the grace and courage to do that. Father, thank you for your love and mercy over us. As we think about the formation audit, we think about the shaping of Jesus. We think about not being conformed to the pattern of this world. God, that could be applied to so many things, from big news events to the very private things that happen in our daily calendars, things that we think about, things that we practice, things that we wish maybe were different. So Jesus, would you give us through your Spirit a fearless urgency to see our souls before you, not in fear, not in judgment, but filled with grace and mercy that leads us to you. And Jesus, through your Spirit, would you shape us more and more to be with you and to be like you. In your name we pray. Amen.